Okay, I literally have no notes for this or anything guiding me through this, so hopefully I don't get too scatterbrained. This is editing Emily popping in. I'm going to be popping in throughout this video because I feel like there's certain things that I need to clarify or things I forgot to say during this because I was very scatterbrained during it. I definitely should have went in with notes or anything to guide me, honestly, but I might just be like popping in throughout to clarify anything. So I apologize in advance for the change from me in the video to me right now. I have talked about this on my Instagram, but this is the first time of me talking about it here. And the day that I'm posting this is 1 year since my diagnosis, my like official like diagnosis. Yeah, so today, the day that I'm posting this would be 1 year from the official diagnosis, as long as this gets posted on the right day. So November 17th, 2021 would have been the day that I was diagnosed. So this is kind of just going to be like overview of the experience of how I got to that point. My whole life growing up, like I always knew there was like something like a little bit different about me, and like I knew I didn't feel the same way that everybody else felt around me. I just couldn't like really pinpoint exactly what was different. I just kind of was like, yeah, there's something different. I feel like I would do kind of some weird things growing up, and a lot of times my family would be like, oh, that's just Emily. They would kind of just put it off as that's me, like that's just the way I am kind of thing, but definitely was a little bit different than other people my age. I feel like I need to clarify here because I'm talking about how my family would just kind of like brush off the way I acted and saying like, this is just the way I am. And the thing is, this is just the way I am. But what I was trying to say was there were things going on that weren't typical, and it is the way I am. They looked at them more as like little quirks in just my personality rather than maybe some sort of developmental disorder that I was struggling with. I also would notice that I would be like very different from the way I acted like when I was at home and safe in my home environment rather than like how I would act whenever I was in public or like at school and stuff like that. I noticed that I acted like completely different because nobody else at school would kind of act silly and do certain things that I did, so I kind of just would try to just act the way I could to fit into like what everyone else was doing. And now I know that that is known as masking, so that makes a lot more sense now, like why I would often be like very exhausted after the school day and would get many like headaches and migraines, and sometimes I would come home from school and I would just have to like go into a dark room with like a cold washcloth over my head and or like eyes and just like fall asleep and take a nap, because if not I just like would not be able to function. I'm already rambling and going all over the place. But anyways, that kind of gives you like a little bit of an idea of growing up. I always knew there was something a little bit different, just wasn't exactly sure. And the other thing that made it kind of difficult is that I never really struggled in school. The main thing I think I struggled with like very young was socializing, and like my mom definitely had a lot of play dates for me to try to get me more comfortable socializing. My parents also tried to put me in like a lot of different sports and stuff like that, but a lot of them didn't work out. One, because I'm not athletic. I am not a team sports kind of person at all, so it wasn't ever going to work out anyways. But the other thing, I was just most of the time too shy to be doing that, so I would quit normally. The other thing, I think the only thing I really struggled with a little bit was like English growing up, but every other class I feel like I was fine with. Like growing up I got pretty good grades. I was very much a perfectionist and needed my everything I did to be the best of my ability, like at all times. Like I wanted it to be perfect. I really think that's a big reason why it was never noticed earlier how much I actually was struggling with certain things, and just the fact that I could always keep up my grades kind of made people like not realize like other things that I was struggling with. And also I've had two close friends my whole entire life. Like I don't think there was a point in time that we were ever not friends from like elementary school on, and these friends I'm still friends with today. So I feel like having them there all the time, they're very understanding people. They just understand me, they get me, and I could be more of myself around them than I could other people. So always having these friends around, I feel like also helped getting through everything, and also didn't make it look like I had no friends, because I have these two great friends that accept me for who I am, and I don't really have to act different around them. I can just be myself, and I know I won't be judged. I had many purposes for talking about these two friends. One being that having these two friends made it so I had friends. It didn't ever look like I was alone, because a lot of times people on the spectrum are known as loners and not being able to make friends and stuff like that. But I had these two great friends that were willing to accept me for whoever I was, and it didn't matter. And there's just something different about these two people that are in my life they're just different than anyone else I've ever had a friendship with. And I think that's what made it so that we could be friends. And I'm very grateful that we met at such a young age and that we are still so close today, because I don't know what I would do without these two people. I also didn't really mention that I had plenty other friendships that didn't work out. I struggled a lot with making friendships with other people my age, other girls my age, and I went through phases of being friends with like larger groups of people, smaller groups of people. By the time I got to high school, I definitely had a smaller friend group and was more on the loner side of friendship, if you want to say. But I always had these two friends no matter what. The point of bringing it up is that I never looked like I was alone, and these friends were different. They were different than other girls my age, if that makes sense. They were not only there showing that I had friends, but also just like they were there to help me get through things as well. And I was able to open up to them about things that maybe I didn't share with my family. So I guess let's fast forward to my first year of PT school. I was in an accelerated program in undergrad, and then I went into physical therapy school, which, if you know anything about it, it is very stressful, and you need your mental health and everything to be like in check going into it, because it's a lot. And I knew this, and I also knew, I don't do well with stress and managing my stress. I also wanted to add in here that growing up, it was kind of like a joke that, I was always in a constant state of stress. Sometimes I would even say I came out of the womb stressed. I don't know how to relax. I'm just always stressed. That's just kind of like a running joke that I say sometimes, and close people around me also say, just because I have always known as being very stressed about everything. It's not just the normal stressed about normal things. I just stress over everything, and some things that don't stress the average person out stress me out. It can be something as simple as getting ready for the day, picking out your clothes, figuring out what you want to eat. Things like that are going to cause me a lot more stress than the average person. So when I say I am not good at dealing with stress, that's kind of what I meant. I don't know how to relieve my stress, and I stress over things on top of just school and my grades and stuff like that. So I knew it was going to be difficult going into it, and every person I ever talked to that would give me advice would be figure out how to manage your stress, because you're going to be managing a lot of it when you're going through this program. I definitely felt that when I started my first semester. I was very overwhelmed already, and I was definitely struggling a lot to manage my time, and this was a huge transition period, trying to figure out the difference between undergrad and grad school, and it was very difficult, and I was definitely having a hard time with it. I ended up reaching out to professors at my school, because one thing I did notice the transition between going into grad school was that the way the professors' attitudes were towards the students seemed to change. In undergrad, I feel like not every professor really cares how you're doing and cares to try to help. Whereas I felt professors, they want you to graduate from the program and be a good physical therapist. That was definitely a big change that I saw that kind of made me feel more comfortable going for help and asking for certain accommodations and stuff like that. But there were professors I talked to, and one in particular that I kind of opened up to about things I was struggling with. So basically my situation is different than others, because a lot of times people don't realize that they are autistic, and they find out through a diagnosis. Whereas in my case, I kind of had feelings that this could be a possibility, and I just ended up doing more research and kind of thought that this was true before I even had the diagnosis. So that's kind of different than a lot of people. So at this point, I had talked to my close friends about it and kind of brought it up to them, and even my friends kind of could see that being a possibility, just because they know me so well, and just things that I expressed to them made it seem like that was what was going on. So basically I started doing a lot of research, which a lot of adults on the spectrum that are trying to figure out what's going on tend to make it their obsession, if you want to call it like a special interest. Like I really think that it became a special interest, and I just started kind of looking into it so much, trying to figure out if there was a way that this isn't what I was struggling with. The fact that I did get so hyper focused on it is almost more proof in itself, showing that I'm on the spectrum, because I literally made autism my special interest. I was doing so much research, and I've also heard from other people like on social media talk about it, saying they had similar experiences where once they got a little bit of a small thought that they could be autistic, they just started researching it like crazy, and it became like their special interest, which I just think that's funny because I was so hyper focused on it, trying to learn everything about it possible to figure out if I was autistic. Every time I would look more and more into it, I just kept feeling more like solidified. Every time I would read people's experiences with it and all that, I just kind of resonated with it, and it just made me feel even more like, yeah, this is it. This is what's happening. Everything I was reading was like, oh, this is me. Like, this is literally just describing me and everything I've ever struggled with. I tried to look into places, people I could talk to, places I could go to potentially get diagnosed, and I found out that this is very hard, which it's sad that it is so hard to go and get an assessment and get diagnosed, which is upsetting because I know that I had the privilege to go and do this and pay for this, because it also is expensive, and I'm grateful that I had parents that were willing to pay for it, and it's not something that is normally covered by insurance or anything like that. So the situation that I had was great because I had a lot of people around me willing to help me find someone to even do the assessment, and then I also had parents who were financially stable enough to pay for the assessment. So not a lot of people have that, and it's very upsetting that some people aren't able to get that diagnosis that they might feel they need because of all of the barriers to getting it. It all worked out really well for me because I was able to open up to that professor, and he actually had a friend who worked with people on the spectrum, so he was like, let me reach out to him and see what I could do. So he was able to help me find someone who could talk to me, and I could express what I was feeling, and he can kind of point me in the right direction, whether or not he thought that an evaluation would be something that was necessary, or if he thought that that wasn't the case and that autism couldn't be something that I was struggling with. Basically, I ended up getting this contact information and scheduling an appointment, and this doctor was a distance away from me, but it worked out because it was during like the pandemic a little bit still. It was just getting into when we were allowed to go like in person to appointments and stuff like that, but he was still doing it virtually, so it worked out perfectly for me because I didn't have to travel to him. I was able to meet virtually, and we just had a few sessions together, kind of just like talking about my experience and struggles that I've had growing up, and I ended up writing him a paper about myself, I guess you could say, like just kind of giving him some details about my life, because I tend to be bad whenever it comes to time to talk to someone like one-on-one. I would have had all these things I wanted to say, but then I forget to say them when I'm actually there talking to them, and I expressed that to him. I said a lot of times I won't remember all the things I wanted to say until after it's over and done with. So I sent him almost like not a portfolio, but just like a paper about myself and all the things that I was struggling with. And he looked at that, and that kind of helped structure what we talked about, because he had all that information, and then he could ask further questions on anything that he was confused about or wanted to know more about. So that was very helpful, and it was honestly a great experience. I couldn't have asked for anything better, because after past experiences I had with counselors and therapists, it was just, I felt like somebody was truly listening to what I was struggling with. And after all of that, there was a lot of paperwork that I had to fill out that he had to mail to me, and also my mom had to fill out a bunch of paperwork as well, just kind of talking about like the things I struggle with from her perspective and then from my perspective. And this is something that I was like really open with my mom about, because growing up, she was at the beginning of my life like a stay-at-home mom, and she was there a lot, and she saw the unique ways that I acted or struggled, and she had her own perspective on what she thought was going on. So she filled out all that paperwork for me, and we also just kind of like discussed more about the possibility, and that kind of made us feel like, yeah, this how didn't we see this before? Like, there was definitely something going on. And after all the paperwork was filled out and the doctor looked over it, he decided that an evaluation would be necessary, and we went ahead with doing the evaluation. And this was all it was definitely different than how it would have been before the pandemic, because everything was virtual, so things were a little bit different. But I'm honestly so grateful for that, because having to go in person and do it, I've heard the experiences that you're in this uncomfortable environment for like 4 hours, and that would have just been like terrible. I can only imagine it would have been like terrible to sit through all that. But instead I was able to be like in the comfort of my own apartment, and we did the evaluation that way. And then he told me he was going to go over all of the information he had collected from that and kind of write like a summary report and kind of like show me all the scores and all that, and then we would meet again to go over it. So he sent me kind of like a draft of his summary of his perspective of what I was saying and what I was expressing, and had me read over it to make sure there wasn't anything incorrect. He wanted to verify that what I said during the evaluation was correct and what I meant to say, and that anything I said wasn't like the facts weren't accidentally like messed up or anything like that. So I'm pretty sure everything was fine with that, and we ended up meeting again to kind of discuss that and if I had any questions. And then he gave an official diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder and then autism spectrum disorder. That's all that was given. I think he also tested for depression, but I think that's the only test that he did during the evaluation. I meant to say this at some point, but I never ended up doing it. But I was 21 when I got my diagnosis with autism spectrum disorder. So like I said, it was November 17th, 2021, and I was 21 years old. So I went, I guess, over 21 years of my life without having a diagnosis. And the main reason that I wanted one was just to understand myself better. And I feel like a lot of people, actually I don't want to speak for other people, but in my situation it's just what I needed. I needed to understand and just kind of know, so I could put a name to all of the things that I had been struggling with, or just like different things about me. It's what I needed for myself. That's kind of like the whole process of it, I guess. It's been a whole year since that, and I feel like it's been forever, but at the same time I feel like it was just yesterday, if that makes sense. I can't decide if it felt like a year ago or if it felt like just the other day. But I could go more in depth of the evaluation process and all of that in another video, but I don't want to spend a ton of time on that because I feel like it could be a whole video in itself of my experience with it. I'm definitely forgetting some details because I am so scatterbrained right now, and I did not plan out the order of what I meant to bring up. But the other thing is that before I even went about doing an evaluation, during my research, I found some other people who were diagnosed late that gave recommendations of some tests to do that you could actually do online and stuff like that, that were, I don't know what word to use, not legit tests, but like they were actual assessments that I think research showed that the results they were giving should be pretty accurate. So I did a bunch of those. I think I did like 3 of those. There was one that was like really long and in-depth. There was one that was about masking, and then there was one that was shorter, and it was for specifically adults, I'm pretty sure. So I did all 3 of those, and all of them pointed in the direction of neurodivergent or being on the spectrum or something like that. So that kind of just solidified. But then I was also like, is this true? Am I making this up, kind of thing? Which I feel like a lot of people go through that after the diagnosis. They're like, am I making this all up, or is this actually what's happening? But honestly, in this year, I've really focused on just trying to understand myself better and find more people like me, which it's great that we have social media to do that, because we can connect with people all over the world and with different experiences. So I've really tried to kind of learn more about other people's experiences, and that kind of helped me feel like I'm not alone in it, and that there's other people, and some also have great tips on different things that I may be struggling with that they're also struggling with. So I've just really focused on just trying to understand why I am the way I am, and giving myself more grace for things that I can't control about myself, and also just trying to be more of myself. I feel like instead of just acting and faking how I feel or the way I am, I'm just trying to be like more of myself and just embrace all the weirdness in everything, because I feel like it's not all bad, and I feel like this world would be very boring. I know it would be very boring if we were all the exact same. So yeah, that's what my focus has been on this last year. I have a feeling that when I am looking back at this, I'm gonna have to add things in, take things out, because I don't even remember what everything I just said, and I bet you I forgot to say a lot that I meant to say. But I just wanted to kind of share this with everyone that wanted to know, I guess, or maybe you didn't want to know, but this is something that's important to me, and it's a big part of who I am and why I am the way I am. So I just feel like it's important to be honest and real, and also because I've been like struggling a lot lately with transitioning back into this semester. I think it's been showing a lot. So I don't know, I just feel like it was a good time. Like the 1 year anniversary felt like a good time to just let everyone know on here. I'm pretty sure I just talked for like 30 minutes straight. And it could have been all nonsense.
And say goodbye to summer.